we're going to learn about font boosting. We finished media queries on Tuesday. And font boosting is kind of another curio. So it's something that's good to know about. And if you're building your pages right, you'll never run into it. And if you're not building your pages right, you'll hit it. And if you do hit it, even if you're building your pages right, you'll understand what's going on because you know font boosting. And so font boosting is when you have a mobile device and you're showing a web page on a mobile phone, and that web page was not designed well for the mobile phone. So the mobile phone says, well, heck, this text is too small to read. I'm going to boost those fonts and make them bigger. And the mobile phone makes your fonts bigger for you. It's making design decisions for you. It's saying this should be this size, that should be that size, and it's going to wreak havoc with your layout, and it's going to ruin your user interface and your user experience because it'll just look funky. But you can understand why mobile phones do it, because if you haven't thought about making the size of the text readable, well, the mobile phone's going to do it for you. So that's font boosting, and there's a way to disable it. And I'm showing it to you because I think it's just another one of those things which is good to know about. So here is like font boosting, no font boosting. I got a paragraph. In my CSS, I have one M. M comes from the letter M. It's the amount of metal space that M took up when you had metal characters that you'd lay out for typography. So I don't know why it ended up in web, but we have an M. And in web, 1M is the default size of 1M is the size of the default font in the browser. So generally speaking, the default size of a font in the browser is 16 pixels, unless you've changed it. So 1M is 16 pixels. Sometimes you'll see people say HTML and font size 62.5%, because 16 times 0.625 or 62.5% is 10. And then that makes the math really easy, right? Because M is looking to its parent element. So if the parent element's HTML and the HTML font is 10, then 1M is 10. Just sort of reset the base or whatever. So whatever, enough of M. But I'm just using M here. We're going to learn about units of measurement and length pretty soon. So here we have just paragraph font size 1M and a paragraph. And I show this. So that is 16 pixels. That font. 1M, 16 pixels. Looks pretty small. What would happen if I change this to 16 pixels, just out of curiosity? How many people think it's going to shift? Raise your hand. How many people think it's not going to shift? Raise your hand. So in theory, it shouldn't shift unless my default font's been changed to something. Whew. I hate it when I'm like explaining stuff and it doesn't go well. And I'm like, okay, now we got to go look into that and figure it out.
Does pixels convert into a point size for fonts?
So a pixel in inches is like 76 or 96 pixels equals 1 inch. Inches. Let's see. 96 pixels, 1 inch. I can't even spell inch. I think 96 pixels is 1 inch, or it's 72 or 76 or something. But that all kind of gets thrown out on the web from my uninformed opinion. In type it does, right? Doesn't it?
Well, yeah, usually it's like 10 point, 12 point. I just wondered, like, when you put pixel on there, if it converts.
We're going to look at units of measurement maybe today. So the main point here is font boosting. The next thing you need to know to see font boosting is we need to be on a mobile device. And to see this on a mobile device, we could go into Developer Tools on Chrome, and I could go into Developer Tools right here, More Tools, Developer Tools, or just the command shortcut. And if your Developer Tools are over on the side, I don't like them over on the side, you could choose by hitting those dots where to dock it. So I'm going to dock it down on the bottom. I like it on the bottom. And now I can click this little icon right there. That's a phone. It's an emulator. So I could click that. I've got a phone. I could change my phone. I have a couple different phones I could choose from. Those are default resolutions. Or I could just enter my default resolution. And I could also enter the device pixel ratio. So the device pixel ratio will help me map from physical pixels to device independent pixels. So the Nexus 5 has 3 physical pixels for every device independent pixel. So it has 1080 pixels on its width with every row of pixels. And if we divide that by 3, we get 360. We get 360 device independent pixels. Just kind of interesting. We're going to learn more about that in a second. But I'm going to refresh this page, and you can see that this page is 1,000 something pixels wide, and it has crammed it into this phone, which is only 360 pixels wide. So everything got shrunk by like a factor of 3. For every 3 of my pixels on my 1,024 pixel wide website, cram 3 of those pixels into 1 of the device pixels. Okay? So it just made everything really small. No font boosting going on there. Font boosting is a little weird. We're learning about font boosting. So font boosting is a little weird because if I come in here and I just change this to 2Ms, right? When I change it to 2Ms, well, here's 2Ms. And let me bring up the previous example so we could see that too. So there's 1M. Here's 2Ms. So that's 16. That's 32 pixels. And on a mobile device, this one looks like that. And on a mobile device, this one looks like that. I think there's some font boosting going on. This is not twice as big as that. This is like a lot bigger, more than 2 times than that. So the fonts got boosted. They got boosted because the mobile phone was like, you don't know what you're doing? I'm going to make this readable. Why it triggered when it's at 2Ms in my CSS versus when it's at 1M in my CSS, God and the developers up in the Silicon Valley are the only ones who know. They've just decided that's the way it is. But we're just learning that, hey, there's this thing called font boosting, which kicks in when you haven't done your job right. So here I have H1, which is 2Ms, and a paragraph, which is 1M. Right? And again, I'm going to see font boosting kicks in because apparently 2M, or at a certain size, things kick in with font boosting. Here's font boosting with no styling. So I just default H1 in a paragraph, and font boosting kicks in. Right? But slightly different than, no, it's exactly the same as when it's 2Ms and 1M. And then here's a Google example of font boosting. So, that totally got boosted. So this is what it looked like before it was boosted. And then we go in there, and it gets boosted. How can we tell it got boosted? Because this is the exact same page with boosting disabled. So here's boosting. Here's boosting disabled. Exact same code. The only difference is we disabled boosting. Boosting. And the way we did it was with this crazy looking code. That's crazy looking. You know when you set max height to 1 million pixels on everything? This is some crazy code. Now max height just means that's as big as it could get. But somehow that disables font boosting for some browsers. And then we got some -WebKit, -MS. What the heck? How many people have never seen that before? Those are known as vendor prefixes. So there's different browser manufacturers. There's different browsers out there. And Microsoft is one. WebKit, who's WebKit? Well, WebKit refers to the browser layout rendering engine. The browser web layout rendering engine is called WebKit. It was created by Apple. It's open source. Apple uses it in Safari. Google forked it, and they used it in Chrome. And it's also used in Opera, which I always want to call Oprah. So WebKit layout rendering engine is used in those three browsers: Chrome, Safari, Opera. MS is used in Internet Explorer and Edge, I think. And strangely enough, the MS layout rendering engine is called Trident. But we don't put Trident there, we put MS. And then there's another vendor prefix called Moz, M-O-Z, which is used in Firefox. And the Firefox layout rendering engine is called Gecko. So inconsistencies is part and parcel for web development. Because if it's consistent, it'd be WebKit, Trident, Gecko. And I'd frankly like that better. But instead we have WebKit, Microsoft, and Moz, Mozilla, for Firefox. You guys just got fire hosed? The takeaway from all of this is that there's this phenomenon known as font boosting, which mobile phones do when you haven't built well for mobile. That's the first takeaway. Know about it, know what it is. You ever see it happening? Oh, I probably didn't design my web page well for mobile. Okay, let me go back and redesign it so everything's readable when I go to mobile. Cool. If you ever want to disable font boosting, there's some hacky stuff you could do. Right? And this is it right here. Totally hacky. Disable font boosting. There we go. Disabled. Now it's not going to get boosted. And it's being done with vendor prefixes. That's like another takeaway. So vendor prefixes enable functionality. Vendor prefixes were built to allow browsers, the manufacturers of browsers, to test experimental technology and give developers access to that experimental technology so they could play with it. What developers did was they said, sweet, this rocks. I'm putting it into production. And they started including their vendor prefixes in production so that people who have browsers can enable these experimental features which aren't turned on by default. You could search. This is shifting a little bit, MDN says, because there are browser flags. And so browser flags is also something which is somewhat related to that. How to change hidden advanced settings in any browser. So you could go in your own browser and turn some stuff on and off. Kind of interesting to play with. But if you look at MDN and you look at vendor prefixes, it says the trend is to add experimental feature behind user-controlled flags, so not developer-controlled vendor prefixes, and to work on smaller specifications that reach stability much quicker. But there's still some holdover of this vendor prefix dealio. And that's why when you look at things like Can I Use, Flexbox, it says unprefixed, only 82% of the market can use this. Put those prefixes in front of it, 96% of the browsers that are out there can use it. But now what they're doing is maybe, for new experimental technology, they're just putting in user-controlled flags, which now developers can turn on and off to see how's this work. I like it, but they can't put it into production code. Interesting. So takeaways from this video. Font boosting. You could disable font boosting with this wacky, hacky code. You shouldn't run into font boosting if you're building your sites right. And vendor prefixes. And then just a curious little thing about web layout rendering engines. WebKit is for who? Who created WebKit?
Apple.
Apple? For which browser?
Safari.
Safari. Which other two browsers use it?
Opera and Chrome.
Opera and Chrome. And MS has what for a layout rendering engine? Trident. And Mozilla has what? Gecko. I just got to check my facts on that. MS Edge layout rendering engine. Edge HTML. Edge HTML render engine. Introduce the Edge HTML render engine. That's new to me. And MS Edge, so MS Internet Explorer layout rendering engine. Trident. So they got a new layout rendering engine for Edge. Makes sense because Edge is supposed to be like way better. Mozilla rendering engine is Gecko. Gecko is the name of the layout engine developed by Mozilla. And then we already saw WebKit on Wikipedia. Anybody have questions? Bang my head against this stuff all day. I don't know why it takes me so long sometimes to just be able to learn how to say that stuff quickly.